My daughter and her husband threw me through a glass door. The sound was deafening, like the sky itself had cracked open. Shards rained around me, glittering like jagged diamonds as I hit the cold, wet patio. For a moment, I lay there in stunned silence, unable to process what had just happened. My blood seeped into the rain-soaked stone, a crimson river mixing with the storm. They didn't rush to help me. They didn't even open the door. Instead, from the warmth of the kitchen, I heard my daughter cry out in a theatrical voice. "Oh no!" She slipped. Her husband muttered something I couldn't make out, but neither of them moved. They watched me from behind the shattered frame, as if I were a stranger. Not the woman who had carried my daughter in her womb, raised her, and sacrificed everything so she could have the life she did. In that instant, the truth was as sharp as the glass cutting into my skin. I was no longer a mother to them. I was an obstacle, a liability they needed gone. My very presence was inconvenient. They had decided to erase me, as coldly as one erases a line from a ledger. The rain stung as it fell against the open wound in my palm. I pushed myself up slowly, trembling, my breath ragged. My cardigan was torn, my body bruised, but the greatest wound was not physical. It was the betrayal of my own flesh and blood. But as I stood there, bleeding under the gray Missouri sky, something shifted inside me. They thought they had broken me. They thought this was the end of the story. But they didn't know the whole truth. They didn't know that beneath the quiet mask of an aging woman, I carried a secret far more powerful than they could imagine. For decades, I had lived modestly, letting them believe I survived only on a pension check and a shrinking savings account. They thought I was weak, dependent, and nearly broke. But the reality was very different. What my daughter and her husband didn't know was that I had built a hidden fortune of $31 million. Money they could never touch. Money that would become the sword and shield in the battle they had just awakened. They had shattered the glass, but they had also awakened a storm. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my dears. How wonderful it is to see you all here again. I'm Martha Johnson, 68 years young, born and raised in Oak Ridge, Missouri, back when the town was barely more than a dot on the map. I've seen cornfields turned into subdivisions, old diners replaced with gas stations, and neighbors come and go like the passing seasons. Oak Ridge may not mean much to outsiders, but to me, it's the soil where my roots run deep. I want to pause just for a second to say this. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do. This little corner of the internet is where I share not just stories, but pieces of my heart. Truths I've lived, mistakes I've learned from, and wisdom I hope will reach those who need it most. Subscribing means you'll always be here with me, and I'll always be here with you. My own daughter and her husband shoving me through a glass door. Those words feel foreign even as I say them out loud. To think that Clarissa, the baby I once cradled, the little girl whose scraped knees I bandaged, would one day stand by while her husband tried to erase me. It's a truth that still stings in my bones. But before I go deeper into that night, I want you to understand who I am and how I got here. Because betrayal like this doesn't happen overnight. It brews in silence, it festers in shadows. And when it finally explodes, it feels like a storm that's been waiting for years. I am not just an old woman tossed aside. I am the daughter of farmers who taught me grit. I am the widow of a hard-working man who believed in my dreams. I am a mother, though the child I raised chose the path of greed over love. And I am a survivor, not of one betrayal, but of many smaller wounds that led to this final act. So, my dears, let us walk together through this story, not just of glass breaking, but of strength mending. And perhaps along the way, you'll see why scars can sometimes be more beautiful than unbroken skin. Looking back now, I realize the betrayal didn't begin with the shattering of glass. No, my dears, that moment was simply the climax of something that had been simmering for months, maybe even years. Betrayal rarely arrives with a scream. It sneaks in quietly, like a draft through a crack in the window, until one day you're standing in a cold room wondering when the warmth disappeared. It began with whispers. My daughter Clarissa and her husband Daniel thought they were discreet, but I could hear their voices drop to a hush the moment I entered a room. Their conversations cut off like scissors snapping a thread. My mail started arriving already opened. Passwords on my computer suddenly didn't work. Even my Medicare card went missing one afternoon, only to reappear a week later in a drawer I never used. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. After all, Clarissa was my only child. Surely she wouldn't scheme against me. Surely the man she married, whom I welcomed into my family, wouldn't dare treat me as anything less than the mother-in-law who opened her home to him. But sometimes the people you raise, the people you trust, are the very ones sharpening the knife behind your back. That Wednesday in Missouri carried the kind of sky that seemed to weep without end. Rain streamed down the windows, dripping steadily onto the patio. The air inside the house was heavy, thick with tension. Clarissa stood by the kitchen island, her face painted with that false patience only a practiced liar can wear. Daniel hovered near her like a shadow, his silence almost more dangerous than her words. "Mother," she said, her tone smooth and sharp all at once, "don't you think it's time you signed the house over to us? You're not getting any younger, and Daniel and I could put it to better use." I looked at her, this grown woman who once clung to me in thunderstorms, now standing across the room treating me like an inconvenience. My heart ached, but my voice stayed calm. "I'm not ready. This home is still mine." Daniel's jaw tightened. Clarissa's smile turned brittle. And in that moment, I knew something dark was waiting to unfold. The rain outside pounded harder, as if the heavens themselves sensed what was about to happen. It was the calm before the storm, the last fragile silence before the glass would break. Clarissa's eyes locked on mine, but they held no warmth, no hint of the little girl who once begged me to braid her hair before school. Her voice softened, dripping with false concern. "Mother, you're just tired. Some fresh air will do you good." She stepped closer, her hand brushing my arm, not with comfort, but with quiet force. Before I could protest, Daniel was there too, looming at her side, his hand pressed against the small of my back. To anyone watching, it might have looked like support, a steadying gesture. But I felt the truth in the pressure of his palm, the way his muscles coiled. It was not kindness. It was calculation. And then it happened. A sharp shove. My body pitched forward. My back hit the sliding glass door with a loud crack. For a split second the glass resisted, groaning against the impact, before it shattered into 1,000 jagged shards. The world exploded into glittering fragments, and I was hurled out into the rain. The patio stones were slick, cold, and unyielding as my body crumpled against them. The sting of glass cut into my hands, my arms, even my face. I gasped, choking on the metallic taste of blood, the rain mixing with crimson as it spread across the slate. From inside the house, I heard Clarissa's voice rise, a perfectly rehearsed cry. "Oh no," she slipped. She fell through the door. Her tone was high-pitched, panicked, but to my ears it rang hollow. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't move. Neither of them came to help. They simply stood there, silhouettes framed by the broken doorway, watching me struggle like I was nothing more than a nuisance. I was 78 years old, soaked to the bone, bleeding on the patio of the very house I had worked my whole life to build. And in that silence, in that rain-drenched moment, the truth cut deeper than any shard of glass. I was no longer a mother to them. I was an obstacle, a piece of property to be removed. Their plan was clear now. They would rid themselves of me, claim my home, and write me out of the life I had given them. But what they didn't know, what they could never imagine, was that their cruelty had awakened something far stronger than their greed. And you, my dear viewers watching me now, let me pause here and ask you something. Tell me in the comments below, which little town are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this video? Was it early morning with your first cup of coffee? Maybe after lunch when the day has slowed down? Or perhaps late in the evening, when the children are asleep and you finally have a quiet moment for yourself? I always read your comments, every single one. And I can't tell you how much joy it brings me to know where you're from and when you choose to share your time with me. It reminds me that though we sit in different homes, scattered across different towns and countries, we are connected here by stories. That, my dears, is a beautiful kind of magic. Let's create a chain of kindness together. If you see someone in the comments, reply to them, wave hello, tell them you're glad they're here. Sometimes the smallest kindness, a few kind words from a stranger, can make someone's whole day brighter. I believe in that, don't you? My purpose in telling you this isn't only to speak of pain. No, it's to show you what comes after. The rebirth, the strength that grows in the ashes of betrayal. You see, just because we get older doesn't mean the scars disappear. They're still here with us. We learn to live with them, yes, but more than that, we learn to transform them into strength. So stay with me, my dears, because this story isn't just about glass breaking and blood spilling. It's about finding the courage to rise again, to to reclaim dignity, and to build something lasting out of the very pain that was meant to destroy me. All right, let's continue. The rain poured harder as I staggered down the driveway, glass still clinging to my clothes, my hand wrapped in a cardigan sleeve to stop the bleeding. My body screamed for rest, for comfort, for help, but my spirit refused to give in. No ambulance was called. No kind voice beckoned me back inside. My own daughter and her husband had made their choice, and I understood now that I could not return. I did not drive to the hospital. Instead, I steered my old sedan down the winding Missouri backroads until the neon glow of a roadside diner cut through the storm. Inside, the smell of fried food and stale coffee greeted me. A weary waitress glanced at my torn sleeve, saw the blood, and without a word, placed a small first aid kit on the counter beside my cup. "Take your time, honey," she whispered. In her kindness, I found more compassion than my own child had shown me. That night, sitting in the corner booth of that diner, I made a vow. I would not scream. I would not beg. I would not play the victim. I would do what I had always done best: observe, strategize, and move in silence. You see, Clarissa and Daniel thought they knew me. They believed I was just a tired old woman living on a modest pension, clinging to a house too big for her. They thought I had nothing left to offer this world, nothing left to defend myself with. But, my dears, how wrong they were. For decades, quietly and patiently, I had built a fortune. Through long nights, careful investments, and opportunities one seized while others were too afraid to take the risk, I grew something that even my daughter didn't know existed. $31 million. Hidden in trusts, accounts, and ventures they could never trace. To them, I was powerless. In truth, I held more power than they could ever imagine. As I sipped that bitter coffee, my hand trembling from the sting of glass, I realized something profound. Their shove had not ended me. It had awakened me. They had shattered more than a glass door that day. They had shattered the illusion that I needed them, that I was helpless. And now, I was ready to show them just how wrong they were. In the quiet of my motel room, with rain still streaking the window and the hum of the heater filling the silence, I knew what had to be done. Survival wasn't enough. I needed proof. Without it, their voices would drown out mine, and the world would believe their lies. A memory surfaced. Weeks earlier, I had felt a prickle of unease I couldn't explain. So I hid a small, motion-activated camera inside the living room, tucked neatly into the hollow of an antique clock my husband once gave me. I told no one. Perhaps a part of me always knew something was coming. With shaking fingers, I opened my laptop and connected to the secure account I'd set up for the footage. What I saw made my heart clench. There was Clarissa, standing at the kitchen island, her face cool and sharp as she pressed me about the house deed. There was Daniel, silent but deliberate, circling me like a predator. Then, the shove, the shattering glass, my body disappearing from the frame. And worst of all, the 30 seconds that followed. Silence. Neither of them moved. Neither rushed to help me. Clarissa finally raised her voice in that false cry of alarm, but the door stayed closed. They had watched me bleed, watched me struggle, and chosen to do nothing. It wasn't just an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an act of violence, clear and calculated. I called the only person I knew I could trust, an old friend named Harold, now a lawyer with a reputation for being as relentless as he was brilliant. When I told him what had happened, he didn't waste time with sympathy. "Send me the footage," he said, his voice steady. "We'll build a case." And so I did. By the next morning, he had already filed the initial paperwork: elder abuse, assault, and attempted coercion. Meanwhile, I began quietly moving my finances into an ironclad trust, locking every account, every asset behind walls no greedy hand could reach. My $31 million was no longer just a secret. It was my shield. That night, as I wrapped the cuts on my hand with fresh bandages, I felt the shift inside me grow stronger. I was no longer just defending myself. I was preparing for war. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and dust, a place where stories are stripped down to facts and evidence. I sat in the front row beside Harold, my lawyer, dressed in a navy blouse and my late husband's watch on my wrist. It wasn't jewelry. It was armor, a reminder of the man who always believed I was stronger than I gave myself credit for. Clarissa and Daniel entered moments later. Clarissa wore black, her hair pinned back severely, her face pale but defiant. Daniel's suit sagged at the shoulders, as if even the fabric had grown weary of carrying him. They didn't look at me. They couldn't. The judge called the case, and Harold wasted no time. "Your Honor," he began, "this is not simply a family dispute. This is a pattern of coercion, manipulation, and violence directed against a 78-year-old woman by her own daughter and son-in-law." Then the screen lit up with the footage. My heart pounded as the images played. Clarissa pressing me about the deed, Daniel circling like a hawk, the shove, the glass exploding, my body collapsing onto the patio. And then, those damning seconds of stillness. The two of them standing there, unmoving, unfeeling, as if watching a stranger's suffering. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of glass shattering on the video. The judge's expression hardened. She leaned forward, scribbling notes, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then came the witnesses. Mrs. Whitaker, my neighbor from across the street, stepped forward. Her voice trembled as she admitted she had seen me leave the house that night, bleeding and disoriented. "I thought it wasn't my place to interfere," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "But now I know I should have spoken sooner." Piece by piece, the facade Clarissa and Daniel had built began to crumble. Their lawyer tried to argue it was an accident, but the evidence was unshakable. The video, the testimonies, the financial documents showing their attempts to access my accounts, it was all laid bare. When the judge finally spoke, her words cut sharper than glass. "This court finds substantial evidence of elder abuse, coercion, and assault. Protective orders will be made permanent. Their assets will be frozen pending a full audit." The gavel came down, not with thunder, but with a quiet certainty. Justice, at last, had begun to take root. The trial was over, and the gavel's echo still lingered in my ears like a distant drumbeat. Clarissa and Daniel's plans had crumbled into dust, their assets frozen, their lies exposed. They thought they had stripped me of dignity, but instead, they had carved a path for me to find something greater, myself. I walked out of that courtroom not as a victim, but as a woman reborn. My fortune, all 31 million of it, was placed into a foundation I named the Hearthlight Initiative, dedicated to women over 60 who had been silenced, cast aside, or betrayed by the very families they nurtured. This foundation became my answer to pain. Where betrayal once lived, now there was purpose. I furnished a modest office in Oak Ridge, Missouri. No grand symbols, no lavish displays. Just a desk, a few chairs, and a plaque on the wall that read, "It is never too late to begin again." Women came through those doors carrying invisible scars. Widows, mothers, grandmothers, and together, we began to stitch dignity back into lives where it had been stolen. Sometimes, in the quiet of my home, I think of Clarissa. I wonder if she regrets it, if she remembers the woman who stayed up nights when she was sick, who sewed her prom dress by hand, who cheered when she crossed that graduation stage. But regret is hers to bear. Forgiveness is mine to choose, and I choose to forgive silently, without offering her my presence again. I no longer walk with my head bowed. I no longer shrink to make others comfortable. The woman they tried to erase has grown louder in spirit, steadier in purpose, and softer only where it matters, in compassion for others who walk the same path. My dear friends, I come to the end of this conversation with a light heart for having shared such an intimate piece of my journey. When I look back, I see that my story is not just about pain. It's about rediscovery, about finding strength in places I didn't even know existed within me. For you women who carry invisible scars in your hearts, I want to say your traumas do not define who you are. They are merely chapters of a much larger story. A story that is still being written by your own hands. For a long time, I believed I needed a savior. Someone who would come from outside to rescue my dignity. But I discovered that within us exists a silent strength, dormant perhaps, just waiting for the right moment to awaken. Reconstruction doesn't happen overnight. It's like a gentle rain on the countryside. It seems insignificant, but it nourishes the earth little by little until one day you notice that flowers have sprouted where before there was only cracked earth. Each small act of courage, be it looking in the mirror and smiling at yourself or saying no when before you would say yes out of fear, is a drop of that renewing rain. I learned that my wrinkled hands are capable not only of making a perfect pie, but also of rebuilding an entire life. Age has given me a wisdom that many mistake for weakness, but it's just the opposite. There is a silent power in us, mature women who have weathered storms and still maintain the ability to cultivate gardens. I discovered that my voice, even when trembling, has power when I decide to use it. And I'm not talking about shouts or speeches, but that inner voice that says, "You deserve peace. You deserve respect. You deserve joy." Hearing that voice, believing in it, was the first step of my healing journey. Time doesn't erase all marks, but it teaches us to transform them into something meaningful. My wrinkles are maps of the difficult paths I've traveled, and today I carry them with pride. Each line tells a story of silent resistance, of small daily victories. And if there's one thing I've discovered, it's that it's never too late to bloom. At 58, when many think about retreating, I was just beginning my true life. Today, at 68, I feel that I still have much to discover, to create, to share. For those still walking through the darkness of trauma, know that there is light at the end of this journey. Not the light of an external savior, but that which you yourself light step by step, day by day. Trust your time, your process. Healing is not linear. There are days of advance and days of retreat, and all of them are necessary parts of the journey. My dear viewers who have watched me this far, I ask from my heart, please subscribe to this channel now and hit the notification bell. Each subscription is like an extended hand to other women who need to hear that it's possible to start over. No matter the age, no matter the trauma, share this video immediately with some woman you know who needs strength to take the first step. A shared story can be the first ray of light in dark days. Leave in the comments the word rebirth if you watched this far and believe that every woman deserves the chance to rewrite her story. Do it now. Don't wait another minute. Your action can be the turning point in the life of someone who is suffering in silence, as I suffered for so many years. And always remember, when we plant seeds of hope in other people's hearts, our own garden blooms even brighter.